the head demon. That's what that man Ross Benham is. There's no accident or gray area about what this man has done anymore. This is a man he's like the dirty cop, but on the financial level, and he's doing it to every person on the entire globe. And he's caught, and he's still doubling down. And then they have the banks vote on the market policy that he uses and later quotes to tamp down the silver price. You can go to the Boca Raton Futures Conference and talk about tamping down the price there to the other banks. And keep in mind, Ross Benham isn't just some dude out of left field. The head of the CFTC, that's one of the 6 people on the plunge protection team, the working group on capital markets created in 1987 after that housing bubble burst for the same reasons every other housing bubble has burst.
Welcome to Pimpy's Investment Chat. I am your host, Pimpy. Today's show, I have Chris Marcus from Arcadia Economics. You can check out Chris's channel on YouTube. It's Arcadia Economics. On there, he does talk a lot about what is going on in the world of silver for silver investors. He covers the analytical side of this as well as the political side. He has on a lot of great guests that I think are very entertaining as well as knowledgeable. Chris, sir, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Great to finally catch up with you. I know I've been trying to do this for a while, and certainly quite a lot going on in the world these days, but nice to finally have a chance to sit down and record and hopefully share some information that can be helpful to people, especially at this time right now.
Yeah, I'm actually a huge fan. When I actually started getting into the investment side of collecting precious metals, outside of just having a huge coin collection, but started taking it seriously as an investor, Lynette Zhang and you were the first 2 people I really started paying attention to. So I really appreciate this.
It's real how different it is from my experience on Wall Street, where it's just everything that's emblematic of government, where stuff happens, it goes bad, they never give you answers, they die, their kids take over, versus, there's some, things to be careful about in silver and mining as well. But I don't know, I like to think one of the things that comes across on the show, I don't claim to be perfect, and I've showed my frustration about some of these things sometimes. And I think there are things that people have a right to be upset about. And with Dave Kranzler, the other guys, and certainly as you and I have talked, a bit over the past year. Yeah,
I like Dave Kranzler. He's entertaining when he's on your show. I think what it is, it's his whole demeanor that I get a kick out of.
Because, there's the monetary part of silver, and certainly I think that is relevant and important. But whether someone has any silver or not, I like to think the things that people can learn right now, and certainly being connected with other good people, whether you're trying to learn or just get connected with people that have a certain style of thinking, people who try and just live a free life. And so,
you got to respect people at least are willing to share their opinion and not walking on eggshells trying to straddle that line in worries that you might piss off one type of group versus another. Me, I just express what's on my mind with no filter, which sometimes can get me in trouble. But, I think people respect that a little more than if I was just trying to, sugarcoat things. Can you just tell people a little bit about your background? Because you did say something about Wall Street, and I like for them to understand what you were talking about.
I was young. I needed the money. Well, I guess that was true. And in hindsight, actually, it's interesting and something I've been thinking about a lot lately, because I graduated Rutgers with a finance degree in 2001. My first job was at Moody's, that nitwit bond rating agency that still says it's impossible to have a credit profile better than that of the U.S. government. Then my first 2 months working there, you had Enron blowing up. Then you had the World Trade Centers go down. I was running from the dust cloud. 21 years later, now I'm noticing some connections of, there's that Bush family popping up again. Yep. And I wonder, I've never seen anything, but the kind of thing that pops into head sometimes and then investigate. Wonder if Bernie Madoff and Ken Lay knew each other.
Sure.
I wonder if they had any silver positions, or if they knew anything about the gold and silver that went missing, because there's that video of George Bush talking about what great buddies he is with Ken Lay. And anyway, this was my introduction to the U.S. workforce. I remember being at Moody's. I was in this asset-backed commercial paper division, which was essentially rating things similar to Enron. I didn't understand why they're creating shell entities to move this thing over there when the same guy owned it. Everybody wanted to work on the 8th floor, which is where the mortgage CDOs were being rated. I didn't quite understand what a mortgage CDO was back then. By 2008, it started to fall into place a little more.
Sure.
After 2 years of Moody's, I was so thoroughly bored to tears there, and I got into Wharton. Went to that criminal collegiate institution where they teach East Coast eager beavers whose parents put as much undue pressure on them as possible to go to the top flight schools where Harvard, Wharton, then you can get your doctors that later go to Pfizer and give out COVID vaccines. And also train the math nerds like myself with Keynesian economics so that you can be the perfect little foot soldier, good boy and girl. Go to the upper levels of Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. And I mean, I think a lot of people don't know what they're getting into, and we all get it at our different point. But really, if there's ever been like a devil in disguise to really trying to steal and corrupt souls, I mean, there you go with some of these banks. After Wharton, 7 years trading equity options as a specialist on the American New York Stock Exchanges for Susquehanna. Then add on the thing that I still think is beautiful about financial markets where, all right, the silver price, I think, there's a increasingly disgusting series of felonies that these banks have to commit to keep that Ponzi scheme together. Yet, there's the one element that I think, if you get physical silver, you can leave it there. And there's going to be a day where you're going to be darn happy you have it. For the folks who do more active investing or trading, which certainly is a different ball game. I'm not saying I don't know everyone who's listening, so I can't say what's right for each individual person yet. The degree that people are approaching things like that, it's great practice in distinguishing between what I think is going to happen, what I think is fair, what I want, and then what's actually going to happen.
I was going to ask you this question to get your opinion on this. There is a lot of conflict of interest between JP Morgan, the COMEX, and the LBMA.
Let's not forget the CFTC, where JP Morgan actually votes on the MRAC. And the CFTC actually reports to the CCP. You can hear Ross Benham talking about this, and you go to the CFTC's YouTube page, February 23rd. You can watch the whole thing. There's JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Citadel voting on the market structure that later on the commissioner, the head demon, I'm not saying that to be funny, and I'm not over-exaggerating it. The head demon, that's what that man Ross Benham is. There's no accident or gray area about what this man has done anymore. This is a man he's like the dirty cop, but on the financial level, and he's doing it to every person on the entire globe. And he's caught, and he's still doubling down. Just like all these guys know, all they know is to double down, like a drunken alcoholic gambler. And then they have the banks vote on the market policy that he uses and later quotes to tamp down the silver price, which he won't tell to the guy who submitted evidence through his own whistleblower, TPS whistleblower hotline. You can go to the Boca Raton Futures Conference and talk about tamping down the price there to the other banks. And keep in mind, Ross Benham isn't just some dude out of left field. The head of the CFTC, that's one of the 6 people on the plunge protection team, the working group on capital markets created in 1987 after that housing bubble burst for the same reasons every other housing bubble was burst. But Reagan, or George Bush, the former CIA director, and the same guy that was financing the Nazi activity through Brown Brothers Harriman.
The whole family has a history within our own country of doing some real shady stuff, going far as back as I could tell Prescott Bush. Throughout history, you can always find all the criminality come back to the Bush family easily. But I can't help but feel it is a distraction from the bigger problem, which is how government has definitely abused the power that they have and used their powers more for criminal activity than they are for the good of the people, pushing us into this great reset. That's really a bigger problem that we're seeing now all around the world. And quantitative easing is one of the worst things that's ever happened to the financial markets here in the United States and around the world. And a true capitalistic free market, I call this a manipulated market right now, because it is.
This isn't a capitalist free market, and it's sad to me when I see now one of the new causes, maybe not new, is that when people are blaming capitalism as the failure, which I think is tragic, because that's why we have anything built, because people pool together resources, whether that's financial capital, or this guy knows how to make cement, this guy knows how to put the cement somewhere, and then you bring all these things together. Sure. And you build a bridge or you build a building.
Well, the thing is,
doesn't go ahead.
I was going to say, well, the thing is, in free-flowing capitalism, if a company fails, well, then they fail. You don't bail them out. Either they...
You don't have the central bank print money to bail them out. That's not capitalism, and it's emblematic of the whole thing where it's all these distortions of the truth. And that's why, by all means, if people are hearing something that I say or that you say and they think, wait a second, it's not possible. But I encourage that. That's what I love about this. People don't have to take my opinion. They don't have to take your opinion.
I always encourage my listeners to do their own research. And when you watch my videos, I just don't say the information. I share the source that it comes from. Usually I put a link underneath the video, and they are more than welcome to go read it or check it out themselves. But yeah, just don't take our word for it. Listen to what we have to say. But again, do your own research, because then you're not relying on the other words of other people. You'll feel a lot more knowledgeable and confident in any kind of decision making when it comes to investments. I keep telling people, look, the markets are manipulated like Pimpy. How do you know that? I tell them how I know this. One of the examples is the cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin. Bitcoin, if you look closely enough, has been following the Wyckoff chart almost to the T. You could take the graphs of the history of Bitcoin and overlay it with the graph of the Wyckoff chart. It's almost exact. If that's the case, the only way for that to actually happen, that's not random. And that's proof of manipulation right there that I'm talking about. For people who don't understand, you could go on the internet and look it up and just look at the graph. Or you could just put Wyckoff and Bitcoin together and you could see how they almost overlap. So if you have this information, you have this knowledge, and you know the trend you're looking for, you can actually make money off of it because you know what they're going to do in advance. So that's one of the things I use as proof of a manipulated market. And of course, you have tons of evidence of gold, silver manipulation. We know the prices are being manipulated. Chris, you filed a complaint with the CFTC, isn't that right?
Yep.
I would love to get an update on that because I haven't caught anything in any of your shows. Where does that stand at the moment? And can you please explain to people what it is I'm talking about? What did you catch?
Sure. Well, I mean, that's the best part. And, I try and share as much as possible on the show. I get it. Not everyone's living inside my brain, but at least for me, especially in the past year, I was able to get past the point of, is there anything I'm missing, or is there maybe something? But it's now when you see the evidence, it's clear as day, and I'll send you a link. We've actually compiled an evidence room full of the different links. For example, the first round of you had the greatest crime in history of silver last February 2nd, when the price of silver, this is during the silver squeeze weekend, it goes up $3 because everyone's buying the heck out of silver for obvious reasons.
And for those of you looking for the file that Chris is talking about, you could go to his website, which is arcadiaeconomics.com, and in there he has the evidence that he's talking about. So feel free to go there.
Then price goes down 10% on the same day that SLV and the trust report adding the greatest chunk of metal in the history of their entire trust. I've called iShares and humiliated them on the phone because we tried asking, how does that happen? And just listing these guys stumble around. All of a sudden, they're not such financial experts anymore.
Yeah, I remember when that happened. They added in one day more than miners produce an entire year, something along those lines.
It's that times a million and just sillier than that. And fortunately, I'll share the link so that people can actually, because there's plenty of this. I'm trying to give a somewhat expedited version, but sure. So the first, all the details of why I'm saying this, where was the specific manipulation, that was written up 10 days later. So just a step back, a timeline. February 1st, Ross Benham of the CFTC says he's launching a silver investigation, threatens the social media people, which is what I think he did, which is what he knows he did. February 2nd, you have the crime. By February 12th, I submitted the first round of data officially through their TPS whistleblower hotline because I had been thinking about it for a while where it's like, all right, I did this stuff on the show and, I think that's what's more important and I focused on first, actually getting the information to people so that it could be helpful to them.
Sure.
But then I was thinking, all right, if I want to make a claim, or I'd seen they had this whistleblower award. So thinking, all right, I'll at least write the thing down. There was a lawyer. We got the whole thing written down. It seemed, I mean, you heard me talk about, I don't know if you've gone through the file, but it seems like to you and most other people, it was pretty clear as day. And we documented that was round one. Then
Yes.
Jeff Curry from Goldman Sachs decided he hadn't committed enough felonies, and he wanted to make sure it was public to the world that Jeff Curry, head of commodities of Goldman Sachs Research, is as equally disgusting and vile and sick and in need of being arrested before he does further harm to his clients or anybody else in the world. So he made that obvious when he lied on TV on Bloomberg February 2nd, on CNBC February 4th, when he said they're hedging futures on the COMEX, which is explicitly prohibited in their fund. Of course, he didn't mention that on February 3rd, in between those felony appearances, that's when they were changing the legal language in the prospectus of SLV, of which Goldman Sachs is a sponsor, specifically to legally protect them against a short squeeze. So the man lied his face off. He got caught. We reported him. And what does the CFTC do? They have these guys set the market policy, and they tell the rest of the banks that they tamp down the price. So then I wrote a letter, it was like a 25-page letter to Ross Benham investigating some things like, all right, when else are you going to tamp down the price, Ross? When else are you going to price fix it?
Was it me, or maybe I misunderstand what he was saying, Chris? It looked like he literally came out and said, look, we committed a crime just to keep the prices from going astronomical. You know what I mean? To put it in a nutshell, it sounded like he said, we purposely manipulated the market in order to keep it from skyrocketing. Did I misunderstand?
It was like that scene in The Big Short where they go down to the they're talking to those mortgage brokers down in Florida. And they step back. They're like, wait a second. Why is he confessing this? And the other guy says,
I remember that.
I don't think they're confessing. They're bragging. He's proud of it. Now these guys are working in the banks, and they're called Jeff Curry. They're called Jamie Dimon, who just got a $34.5 million bonus. That's dirty money, too. And in fact, that's one of the things that now, rather than sitting around waiting, and what I've been doing in the time behind the scenes, is identifying, all right, it's great. The banks do this, they're evil. Okay, now there's $34 million. That is dirty money. If you look at JP Morgan's share price, it was about $120 right up before Silver Squeeze. I think it went up to $170, around $160, $150, $160 now. This is stolen money. This is stolen money. The evidence is there. And the regulators, it's unfortunate that they're as disgustingly vile and corrupt as the disgustingly and vile corrupt people at these banks.
Sure.
And that's why people have asked, why, geez, Chris, are you sure you should be saying these things?
My auntie calls me all the time, and she's like, please, Lee, some of the things you talk about could be very risque. There's a chance that your government come after you. And this is what I tell her, and I tell everybody when I do my shows, and this. There are some things out there that are bigger than ourselves. If somebody doesn't say something, and you're constantly afraid.
Who's going to speak up? Joe Biden?
Yeah.
Who's the voice of reason out there that's doing something?
So I want to ask you a couple of questions to get your opinions on something. In 2008, everybody was pissed when we did what's called a bailout. Remember this? Everybody raised hell. Why are we bailing out these banks? They should have failed. They're too big to fail banks. And then not only that, we find out the bonuses that some of their CEOs and execs got, which pissed us off even more. So it was nice of Obama to come through and say, guess what? We're going to outlaw bailouts. But inside the language for that law, they had what's called a bail-in. Are you familiar with the bail-in?
Unfortunately.
I'm trying to explain to people a bail-in is different than a bailout. With a bail-in, they just take your money out of your bank account. They did a test run in Cyprus to see how the public will respond. There was a huge outcry. I saw interviews with a lady. She had $6 million in the bank. They were insured at $150,000 because that's what the FDIC covered. She got her insured amount, but she lost all the rest of her money. It's gone. And then not only that, the government taxed the insurance at 6%. Talk about adding insult to injury. This is what we have to look forward around the world. And I keep telling people, if you have your money in a bank, that's a bad idea. A lot of the friends that I know that are millionaires, rich people, when we talk, they go, we don't keep money in the bank. I'm like, why? They go, no, who would keep money in the bank? First of all, you don't make no money that way. But I also watch their habits whenever they're aware that a market is going to crash, they start moving into collectibles, painting. Sports cards are at a record high now as far as auctions are concerned. Gold, silver, always a big thing. Undeveloped real estate, not houses, undeveloped real estate. And I go, why do you guys do that? They go, to protect your money. When the market crashes, we're out of risky stock. I did a video showing Michael Berry, who manages a $600 million account, sold 94% of his stock. He only plays around with 6% of it. That's a huge amount of money that he's removed out of risky stocks and still only playing around with 6% of that. That's unbelievable to see. Why do you suppose somebody like Michael Berry would sell off 94% of his stock and only play around with 6% of it?
I mean, we know darn well why they're doing it. We know why a lot of the stuff is happening. The information's out there, but people say, well, if this was really happening, how come nobody warns about it? They're warning about it. But anytime anybody speaks the truth, you have a lot of people, everyone's a conspiracy theorist, and they don't even look at the evidence. It's going to be also the end of the paper silver market because a lot of the same people. Ross Benham reports directly to Joe Biden. He was reappointed by Joe Biden. So they're together in this.
Well, they just reappoint the same criminals to continue doing the criminality. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and you're already seeing physical silver premiums shoot up while the COMEX is getting torched every day. So that's really what, in the end, matters, because if you want to get physical silver, the price is going up, whereas COMEX is going down. So the market's already breaking. Who knows? Maybe we'll be sitting here next month, and, you could say, oh, well, the premium's $100 over spot. Well, I would say, no, silver's $125, even if the COMEX says $22. But if you look at the actual data that's available, and similar here, that's the metric. The physical to paper spread. It's blowing out now. The same way at the end of The Big Short, they're like, hey, this thing's blowing out now. There's a point at which, all right, there's, things stays there, and you say for decades or years, fundamentally or over the long term, this should happen. But if you're, and by all means, yeah, the COMEX still says 22, 23, and that's fine. But if anybody wants to know my opinion as someone who's sat there for the last 15 years, basically doing nothing else in life but looking at silver and reading any data piece that I can and having a trading background, what am I seeing? It's blowing out now. The indicators, like the seismograph is going off. It's saying the earthquake's already started. All right, the volcano, it's okay. If you look inside or you have the tools to measure, the lava's about to come out. And people can like it or not like it, and what day it will happen. If you really want to know what day it'll happen, keep an eye on the COVID stuff, because they're going to be heavily interconnected.
You brought something up on your show that I had not paid attention to. You said our premiums are higher now than they were when silver was much higher during the silver squeeze. Is that right?
I said want to be specific because depending on the products, but I believe the junk silver premiums have already gone over very close to where they were with silver squeeze. And I mean, there's most stuff you can't get right now. Last time I talked to Andy Schechtman, I said, if somebody says I want 1,000 ounces of silver, can you fill that? He's like, yeah, we can fill it. But I mean, I think he said Britannias and Philharmonics you can't get right now. I mean, these aren't like some numismatic products. That's, the major stuff. Things are unavailable. Premiums are spiked higher. And actually, the reason that I compare the premiums is because if you actually look at what happened Silver Squeeze weekend, they didn't run out of metal, but it was just the amount that had been hedged got purchased. They weren't prepared for that. So that surge. But now you're seeing the premiums go up. And this is at the same time. The other thing Schechtman mentioned was that, he's getting calls from people. They're like, I just want my money out of the banks now. And rightfully so.
Sure.
And that's why all these pieces, I get it. People, some people just want to know when's silver going to go up. Let me know. All right, I'll tell you. But if you want to, at least for, if people are wondering how much time do I have left or where does it look like we are, that's what I'm at least trying to put the context on. Or if people are saying, hey, is silver really manipulated? Here are the clues so that you don't have to take my opinion, but then you can examine and have, because the banks aren't going to tell you this stuff.
Well, it's funny because I remember during a silver squeeze, retailers are shutting down and everybody's in naked negatives. And I was like, yeah, that's a good thing for us anyways. For the retail side, they're being sold out. Unfortunately, they were sold out past what they had, and they had to find a way to recoup that. But that should give you an indication that people were taking this seriously. There are more people, in my opinion, today that are more educated and more involved with investing into physical gold and silver than ever before. It's still a small number, but I think people are a lot more wiser. And Andy brought this up one time during a conversation. He said, even when the prices drop down, nobody's getting scared. Nobody's parting with their physical.
The price goes down, people buy even more because
Yes.
they know it's rigged. They know why it went down. And when you know those two parts, then you can say, oh, I'm buying a $20 bill for $10. Okay, now Jerome Powell said inflation is going to make the boogeyman pop out of left field. So $20 bills are on sale for $5. It's asinine. It's stupid. And, maybe you have to, some people, if you need cash to pay off your bookie next week, then that's where your risk is. But I mean, maybe in wrapping up, the thing I'd leave with is that, all right, I get it. You've had to wait and, stocks are going up, but it's like, what are your alternatives? You like $22 silver? You like negative yielding treasuries? Do you really want to trust in this system where all the Fed governors are getting caught front running their own policy? So I would suggest don't worry about what CNBC or Jim Cramer is saying. Think for yourself. Don't do what I say. Don't do what anybody else says, but
do your own research. That's what I tell them. Don't just take our word. Go out there and research what we're talking about. And for me, a lot of times when I'm talking about some things, I will leave a link to somebody's video, or I will leave a link to an article that I'm reading, because, I tell them maybe I'm misunderstanding what I'm reading, or maybe I'm misunderstanding what I'm hearing, but at least you guys know where the information is coming from and you could go see for yourself. I do that quite often. I just want to ask you a couple of questions of why should people not be into ETFs as far as gold and silver is concerned versus physically owning it?
Well, if you don't like getting ripped off and having your money stolen from banks, I'd be really careful about SLV. I was actually just about to send you that link again with the evidence file where it explains in quite more detail the danger of them. These guys are selling silver that they don't have. They're selling the same ounce a lot more than one time. And maybe a short version is that I explained some of these things. It was about a week or two after Silver Squeeze last year to a friend of mine who's a hedge fund manager. And I said, now that you know this, if you own one share or a million shares of SLV, what would you do? And he just says, I would sell. I would have to sell. And then I asked him, let's say that, would you say that if someone was running a fund that was invested in SLV with customer money and they heard what I just told you and they didn't sell every share of that as fast as they could, was there any gray area that would have placed them at fraud risk as a financial fiduciary? And again, he said yes, because the information when you look through it is that glaring. And again, you can take a look at this link. I'm about to upgrade the whole file now to a ton more stuff that's come out since then. So I would be very careful about. I don't own any SLV and don't have any plans to.
I think it was Kitco that said that they don't own enough silver versus the shares that they had. And then all of a sudden we've seen a bunch of people dropping the paper version, selling it on the market to turn around and then go buy the physical. And then what we saw happening in the financial news is like, look at people are really confident in the economy that they're selling off their gold and silver. I was like, you're just lying. They're selling off the paper side of it to buy the physical side of it, but it didn't keep them from trying to say, look, people are getting out of the safe haven to get into risky assets. They take the information and they just twist it to push their false narrative of what's going on. In my opinion, we see that happen quite often. Cryptocurrencies. What is your feeling on cryptocurrencies?
Well, that's a bit of a sensitive topic these days because I think the concept of blockchain is something, that I always think of similar to like what Visa or MasterCard does. And anything that is transparent and gets us away from something like the Federal Reserve, I think is good. And my guess is that there will probably be some that hopefully we'll be using that will be, some of the backbone structure of a more honest economy going forward. Although I have a lot of concerns not as much that, like about the concept, but just some of the people that I see getting involved. I think there's going to be a lot of people getting burned in the cryptos. Let's even say Bitcoin goes to 100,000 or 1,000,000 or it becomes something that we're using and is productive to society. I'm very concerned. I had an issue recently where there's a crypto I held on to for a while because I believe in the person running it and that it's a legitimate project. And I've been stunned at how hard, as someone who has a background in finance as an options market maker, the liquidity and how difficult it is and how unreliable some of these sites are. I'm not saying I'm sure there are people who are very savvy at cryptos that know the ways around that, but it is certainly, this is just my experience, other people, but from what I've seen, if this is going to be a part of our system, there's a lot of work to be done because there are some things that concern me, and maybe that's as best as I can phrase it right now.
Is Bitcoin the new gold? Is Ethereum the new silver?
I don't know that I would make that comparison. I don't know what they are. I mean, I have a good idea of what silver is, what it's used for, why I like it. I see the potential of what these things could be used for, but
I say the same thing. I support the premise, but here's the thing. Gold or silver have intrinsic value. To me, cryptocurrencies are nothing but a digital fiat version. What is really supporting these things? They're only as valuable as people think they are, but one day people are going to wake up and say these things really have no value and they're going to crash. But I also tell people be smart enough to understand that this is an opportunity in which you can make money off these things if you're smart about what you're looking at.
I mean, look at it like this. What is the value of Visa or MasterCard? Well, I mean, there's value there because transmitting money is an essential component. And so think about, like, if you just had something that was better than the Federal Reserve, there's trillions of dollars of value in that. So the idea that Bitcoin or cryptocurrency could provide legitimate, it's something that is needed. It's just my experience has been just find it's very frustrating at this point to, I can eventually get there, but it requires hours of phone calls, and even the people who are experts, it's hard for me. It's been a struggle for me, which is not to say it's not a valid concept or won't go up in price. Just
my thing is the government's never going to allow anything to compete with their own currency. We have the central bank digital currency, which I think people should fight at every level. If we look at what China's doing with the digital yuan, it has an expiration date on the currency, which means you'll never be able to save. You'll never be able to retire. That'll keep every man, woman, and child in perpetual, enslavement. Think about this. There's no wealth transfer according to the Great Reset. They think that all money should go back to the states because the people should get the money, not the kids, which I think is terrible. And even if they did allow that to happen and you got your money in the central bank digital currency, it has an expiration date on it. So people getting all excited about the ISO 222 system, which is just a messaging center. But you have 5 cryptos that are compliant, but they're also contributing to the central bank digital currency. I say, look, don't get excited about those cryptos. They're part of a bigger problem that's coming up. Who the hell wants currency with the expiration date on it? How can you ever retire? How can you ever save? I mean, this is real dangerous information. We got the guy, Augustin. I play the video all the time. I call him Turtle Man. There's a small clip in which I play. I don't know if you've ever seen it, Chris. Have you ever seen him talk about what the digital currency is? Like, give me 1 second. I'm going to play this for you right now. I want to get your opinion, what he says. This will be a quick clip. This is Augustin Karsten. This is the guy from the Bank of International Settlement. This is October the 19th, 2020. He's going to tell you exactly what the central bank digital currency is.
CBDC, in particular, for the use of general use, we tend to establish the equivalence with cash, and there is a huge difference there. For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that.
If this doesn't wake people up, I don't know what will. He's saying that with cash, they have no idea who has it or what people are doing with it. But with the central bank digital currency, not only will the central banks have absolute control over what it is that we do with the money, but they will have the tools to enforce that. What happens if all of a sudden they want to continue pushing this climate change agenda and they say, we're going to program the central bank's digital currency so that you can only buy items and products and services from companies that we like. And that's forcing companies around our nation to fall in line with their agenda. Because if you don't, they could technically put you out of business and bankrupt you just by programming the central bank's digital currency and prohibiting it to be used from a store that you own. That's really putting a lot of control and a lot of power into the hands of our very own government that nobody trusts at this moment. Our Constitution would just be wiped away, because if you speak out against the government and they don't like it, they can fine you or they can block your money. They can end your Second Amendment rights just by programming a central bank's digital dollar to prevent you from buying guns or ammo. Essentially, the government could force you to do whatever you want. So you can imagine if they have that kind of power and control over your money and they program it, you don't have access to your money. They could do that. That's what this central bank digital currency does. So you can understand why that's a major concern for a lot of people. You're going to need something outside of the system. That's why I always encourage people to buy gold and silver, because it is outside of the system until people get fed up with it and finally do something about it. This is a one world government they're talking about, and the central bank's digital currency. Well, that's the one world currency. Here's the other thing you'll love about this, Chris. You can sell your gold and silver and get central bank digital currency for it. But guess what you can't do? You cannot spend your central bank digital currency to buy gold and silver. Why do you suppose that is?
Well, I mean, we know why that is, and these people aren't trying to help you. They're not your friends, and that's basically what I would say to that fella.
Before we close up here, I'm sure people have asked this a million times, but I can't help it because I want to ask too. In your opinion, what should be the true value of gold and silver?
Well, I guess it depends on which day's money supply, but I'll put it like this. I understand I do a show and I'm very careful because I know people are going to take certain things the way they do. My guess is that before this is all said and done, you'll see numbers that are beyond what people think is possible. And even for the people who are frustrated with the weight, at least in terms of what your gold or silver will be able to do, it's my strong belief that you will be stunned. And just imagine if Bitcoin went from $1 to 60,000 or wherever it's at now for the last 10 years. Silver, if it just does a 40x, is at $1,000. And then consider what the people with the money supply are doing. And so I don't know that it's going to be, but in terms of what your silver will buy, I certainly think it's going to be worth the wait. And I feel more confident every second of life I watch unfold.
Yeah, 96% of my money is in gold and silver. I tell people I do have some exposure when it comes to cryptocurrencies. It's not that I don't support what cryptocurrencies are trying to do. It's just that I don't trust governments from finding some stupid excuse or creating some false flag event that gets crypto shut down but forces us into the central bank digital currency, which is what we don't want to see happening. But I'm also noticing that every country around the world has now came up with their own central bank digital currency, and it's being pushed onto people. I could tell you that in Bahamas, the central bank digital currency was already launched, but something happened, and they have been down now for 3 weeks. So if your entire economy and your entire livelihood is attached to the central bank digital currency and it goes down and you can't get access to your central bank digital currency, how do you buy food? How do you pay rent? How do you pay your bills? How do you get gas? These are the concerns that people should have. If people want to look it up, they can go on and Google it or Yahoo it or whatever it is you do. You could go on there and look up the Bahamas central bank digital currency. It's called D Cash, like the letter D, Cash, C-A-S-H. and see that it might still be down. I haven't followed up on it, but it was down for over 2 weeks. So my question was, if they're 100% cashless society, how were they managing when the system was down? I mean, this may sound like a simplistic question to some people, but it's truly something that people should be asking, the what ifs.
I agree, and it's some days a daunting task, but I think the more you ask those what ifs now, then the nice part about that is that it's like being prepared for anything, and then when it happens, you can end up having things go a bit better because you did take that time to do that. And not to alarm people, but I would suggest that yes, it is a time to really start taking some of these things seriously.
The lesson from 2008 is people, when the markets crash, they're too big to fail banks. Some people lost 40, 50, 60% of their retirement because the money was invested in the actual stocks. Most people don't realize that. Your 401k, your mutual funds, your IRAs, they're invested into the stock market. So when the stock market crash, you lose a lot of the value that's in your retirement. It doesn't just stay there and it continue to accumulate. Value is only as good as a stock market. They had to use the rest to survive on while they try to get another job. A lot of people were already retired and they had to come out of retirement because the money they were relying on to live off of while they retired was gone. It got wiped out. And many people had to go back to work. Had they thought about taking 25, 30% of the retirement and moving into physical gold and silver, they would have been protected.
A lot of people learned that lesson with Bernie Madoff. And I think the people who watched that and studied it are going to get to avoid it. I think it's unfortunate that it's going to happen, but it seems pretty clear where this is headed. And yes, I'm fortunate I didn't have to imagine that. But I think everyone who saw these things coming, it hasn't been the easiest decade. But now it's going to be a lot easier to navigate through some of these things. And that's the advantages of thinking about these things in advance, whether they're easy or not. That's why you do it.
Me making a suggestion that they move 25, 30% of their retirement into gold and silver. Is that too much, or is that being conservative? I mean, in your opinion, what do you think?
I mean, it's a personal question that's going to be different for everyone. But, when I left Wall Street, everything I had was in gold and silver. Now, I was also willing to take the ups and downs and go figure out how to start a business in the 10 years. So there's risk to anything. And I'm not saying that's what other people should do. But, I mean, I think the justification for doing, what you feel, not maybe what traditional advice would recommend. I mean, it's not an unreasonable statement you're making. And I've personally gone much farther because it's like I know what cash is now. And I'm able to wait. If I have to wait 20 years, or maybe if I have children one day and I'm leaving this to them, then I'll know that it'll be there. I mean, I'd still look at what cash is, look at the people who are associated to it, look at what's happening to the supply, and then, talk with your family and your loved ones, or if you have a financial planner, and decide what's right for you. But I understand many people would think what you're suggesting might be unreasonable. I would also say there's a lot of things happening in the world that are a little different than we ever even guessed were possible.
I not only talk the talk, but I walk the walk. I wasn't exaggerating when I said like 96% of my money is into physical gold and silver that I own and have in my possession. If I ever need more money, I just go down to my local gold and silver dealer. I have an arrangement with them. I cash in some of my silver and use the money for whatever I need. But for the most part, I don't keep any money in the bank. I get my money and I keep it in a safe along with my gold and silver. Nothing in the bank, only very bare minimum in order for me to cover my bills. And that's as good as it gets. I don't trust that we won't have a bail-in. And I don't trust that the fiat dollar is not going to crash down to crap before all this is over with, and that we're not going to see the same thing that happened in 2008, but at a much larger scale, in my opinion. Chris, sir, thank you for coming aboard. I know your time is precious. You definitely are all over the place, my friend. So thank you for coming aboard.
Well, I appreciate that. And I guess it feels like the time certainly to do whatever we all can to help people see what's going on, because it's some tough stuff, but I appreciate you giving me the chance to talk with you and share this with your audience.
Yeah, in the future, I'd love to have you aboard again, if you don't mind. I respect everything that you talk about, everything that you cover. I am a big fan. So, I always tell people, look, just don't listen to me. There's a handful of people I encourage that my subscribers go listen to. You're definitely at the top of my list. You, Lynette Zhang, these are people that each one of you bring a different perspective to precious metals. And I do respect that, and I appreciate all that you do. So again, thank you, sir, for coming aboard.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's kind of you to say that. And thank you for being a voice that's needed at this time as well.